Hey all, my name is Madde. I'm usually a software developer here at 1337, but today I will be your host for this live stream. We're in some kind of crazy times right now. Many of us are working from home, our routines are different, and we've all had to make a lot of adjustments in our daily lives. But one thing remains the same, and that is our mission to create value by sharing knowledge. So we usually run something called co-lunches, which simply means that we provide food and knowledge for you. But given the circumstances that we have, we've had to think a little bit differently. So today we won't supply you any physical food, but plenty of food for thought by streaming time for you. So I've always considered myself as an introvert, but after working from home for 1.5 weeks now, I realized that I kind of need to have people around me to feel energized and happy. So I must say that working remotely has exceeded my expectations, but I really miss having people around. Both the informal chats when you grab a coffee or when you actually cooperate with other people. So I think that we still have a lot of things to learn in this different times. And that's why I'm so excited for our first guest here at this live stream. So not only has he been programming for over 30 years, he is also one of the founders for the No Estimates discussion and also one of the founders of mob programming. So if there's someone to teach us something about remote work, I think that it's Woody Zuill. So hi, Woody. So great to have you with us.
Hi there. Thank you so much. I'm really, really happy to be here.
That's great. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing really well. I hope everybody's doing really well. This is an
Yeah,
important time to take care of ourselves.
I agree. It really is. So I think it's really great to have you here, as I said, and I really look forward to hearing you teaching us about mob programming remotely. So I think that we should get going directly. If you have any questions for Woody, please post them in the comment section below, and I will make sure to forward them to him after the session. But now I'll hand over the word to you, Woody.
Thank you very, very much. So this is all kind of new to me. So as this goes, please forgive me if things don't seem to sync up exactly, but I'm working on that right now. So I'm Woody Zuill, and what I'm attempting to do today is have share some ideas with you about how mob programming can work remotely. And working remotely with mob programming isn't anything very much different than working as a team co-located. There's some concerns we have to have about how we interact and a few other things like that, but mostly this is pretty straightforward. So I always start all my talks with this little slide. I'm not here to tell you what to do or whether or not you should do it. I just want to share with you some of the things that I've been experiencing, and let's see how that goes. I've got to adjust something here. I'm already finding myself needing to figure out uh, how to use my system here. There we go. Okay, so I'm working with a team right now who is they've chosen a team name of Apollo 13 for certain reasons, but I'm going to share with you what I've learned about Apollo 13. If you've seen the movie, you've probably seen some of this stuff. But these three people, pardon me, were going to take a trip to the moon. And interestingly, everything was nicely planned out, and they got on board and took off. And what we found, here's our uh, mission control room just before they had an accident on board that caused them to reconsider the whole mission. But I like to point this out when I talk about mob programming, that all these people here have gathered together at the same time in the same space to work on the same thing. And all the knowledge that's needed for this mission is in this room or in rooms where they're connected more or less live with this group, plus some people in a space unit somewhere out in the middle of space. And then the accident occurred, and you've heard this famous phrase, Houston, we've had a problem. What had happened was, I think it was in an oxygen tank, there had been an issue that caused the destroyed that unit. and they had to figure out how to work around this. The main problem was they no longer had enough oxygen to finish their trip the way they were doing it, and they needed to cut back on all of the activities that were being done, conserve their energy, find a way to get rid of the carbon monoxide or dioxide. I don't remember, and somebody could tell us. But here's the basic idea: they needed to solve this problem, and they gathered together this knowledge, all the things that they had on their actual uh, item that was up in space. They needed to work with whatever was there. You've heard this story, I'm sure. And they came up with this thing that they called a mailbox. And you can see it's made out of some plastic bits, and it's taped together with some duct tape. It's got parts that were just around. Some of those plastic stuff was just covers ripped off of manuals that they would use. And this is what it looks like once it got itself reconstructed in outer space. And this is what I want to share. The people on the ground figured out what they had available and how to work with it. And then they had to describe over with a very remote team, they had to describe in words how to build this thing. So this is what I would consider a very serious remote operation, and these are those same people returning back to Earth, and this is how they described it. This improvisation was a fine example of cooperation between ground and space. If they, in that situation, they're essentially a lot more remote than we are. If they can do it, we can do it, and I really appreciated this. This story really speaks to the idea of how can we do things remote? We can find a way. They found a way. So it's not co-located versus remote. It's just slightly different aspects of the same thing. So the basic idea is the same. The techniques have to differ just a little bit. And there's some challenges. They're just different, but I'm going to talk about the challenges of working remote. Working as a team remotely takes a little bit more effort. The keyboard and screen sharing, and how are we going to be able to share our view and working on the same items? That's something we need to consider. How are we going to use drawings and diagrams when I'm teaching teams to work co-located to do this? It's a little bit of a problem. Uh, in my opinion anyways, it's a little bit of a problem to use the whiteboard, and we need to figure that out. We need to be able to maintain healthy interactions, and I'm going to be discussing all these things in detail later on. We need to figure out how we're going to share ideas remotely. I just came out of a meeting before I appeared here, and there were about 20 people in the meeting, and there was a lot of interplay where one person would be speaking and someone else would try to speak at the same time. And we can't use the same techniques of conversation we might have when we're sitting in the same room because it garbles everything up. So these are things we need to learn, some kind of protocol for the remote conversations. Let's look at a little quick introduction to mob programming. I'm going to go through this really quickly. For those of you who don't really know what mob programming is, I like to share it this way, that it's about all the brilliant minds working together on the same thing at the same time and in the same space. Now we have to think of it as a virtual space. But this is what allows us to collaborate. We can't collaborate if we're not working on the same thing. And it's difficult to collaborate when we're not working on it at the same time. We have to set meetings or send emails, and then we're always shifting our context because someone else is working on some aspect, we're working on something completely separate at the same time. And then when they have a question, they have to interrupt us. We have to try and understand. These things can be difficult. With mob programming, by being in the same space and time, we are staying in the same context together, and this can be very valuable or very useful to us. Working at the same computer is what turns it into mob programming because it's very focused. We are proving to ourselves we're working on the same thing at the same time in the same space if we're all at the same computer. Well, that changes a little bit when we're working remotely. We have to use some kind of online shared environment, and we'll figure that out. The basic idea is this: we're going to gather together all the skills and knowledge we need so we can work directly on anything from beginning to end without the interruptions and waiting, without increasing our inventory, without multitasking, without disruption. This essentially is what makes mob programming work for us. It looks like this. This is a team working co located. But here's a team working remotely. I happened to be in Brazil at the time this work was going on, and here's people that were in Newport Beach. We were setting up for a workshop that we were going to do. Uh, a lot of people will ask, how can that be effective? You got five people just watching one person coding, everybody's waiting to get their hands on the keyboard. But that's not at all what mob programming is. We have a protocol and we have a way of working to keep it from being chaos and where everybody stays involved. And I'll only speak to that a little bit today because this is more the intro stuff. But it seems crazy. It actually seems impossible. But I'm going to show you some pictures quickly here of different teams all over the world. This is where we originated the idea, Hunter Industries in San Marcos, California, and this is them after I think this was in 2016. After we'd been doing it almost well about 4 or 5 years, they had expanded out to having nine or six. Pardon me, six teams working this way. Here's groups all over Alaska, UK, Boston, London, Stockholm, another group in London, Zito in California. The three groups you see here are all part of much larger organization that has many teams mob programming. I think when I was at this setting in Stockholm, they had seven teams or six. In London, they had six teams. This company at the bottom, Zito in San Diego, had 10 teams. So, you know, it's spread all over the place. Here's some more. These people in Japan are sitting on the floor there. I find that to be really interesting. I tried that. I'm not quite suited to it, but it's interesting to see this that everybody's finding how to make it work best for their own team. Of course, that picture from 1960, that I don't think they're mob programming. I never talked to them. I think I was 6 or 7 years old when that picture was taken, so I wasn't even thinking about these things. But it looks to me like they're all working on the same thing at the same time in the same space. The only thing is, I probably would have encouraged them to get some large monitors, but I think in those days they hadn't quite figured out that they should be using monitors. So, anyways, that, by the way, is Admiral Grace Hopper in the center of that one photo. This is a group in Sweden, SVT, and I really like to show this screen because you see all the use of the whiteboard, and I think the whiteboard is really critical here. And unfortunately, we need to find some kind of alternatives. It can be a little bit more difficult to do this remotely, but that's here's a picture of a team working remotely. These people are spread out across the eastern coast of the U.S. I think it's actually quite important that we understand our biggest challenge is time zones. So if we're trying to work as a team and somebody's halfway across the globe, that introduces, I think, quite a difficulty. There are ways to work around it, but more importantly, that may be the biggest technical challenge. So it's not. So this isn't impossible to do. So here's another team. You saw that already. Another team. This is Zapier, I guess, in working remotely. They've written some articles about this. This is the people at Cucumber IO. I think they've been doing mob programming probably for 5 or more years. You can see them supporting these ideas online. They've written blog posts as well. We already talked about mission control. We've gathered all the knowledge we need in one place. It's not mob programming, but it's the same basic idea. We're going to we're going to gather together all the knowledge and skills that we need. The basic concept is we're going to try and optimize for the flow of the work rather than the output of the individual. Usually, when we separate people, the reason we're doing that is we think that people can be working in parallel on stuff, and this optimizes for the output of the individual. And what we found with mob programming is that it's better to optimize for the flow of the work. So I want to point this out. It's not about speed. It's not about trying to work faster. It's trying to work better. It's more like we're trying to shorten the race. And so if we can work all together, we can we can go directly from the beginning to the end of any idea, like a story that we want to accomplish. If we can work directly to it, we've shortened the race. We're no longer having the waiting periods and waiting for meetings and waiting for dependencies. We can figure this out. So we're not trying to get the most work out of each person. As a matter of fact, what we're trying to do is get the best of everybody into everything we do. That means if we collaborate well, we have a better chance of getting that best of each of us. So I'm going to share a few techniques, and a lot of these relate to working remotely. And then I'm going to give you at the end of this the idea of what I call my remote work quick start to help you think about some of the things you need to do to get going quickly with this. The basic idea is the same in both. We're going to have a driver and navigators. And the navigators are basically there to think about what we're doing next in the next few minutes. And the driver is paying attention to what we're doing immediately. What line of code am I typing right now? And the navigators are keeping us with the ideas flowing, and that's what we're attempting to do here. The reason for the driver is to allow the rest of the team to stay focused on where we're going, rather than there's a red light, there's a green light, past this truck. Well, that's the stuff. That's the immediate stuff the driver can do without direction once they know where we're going. It'd be just like me getting in a car and I'm navigating you. You're going to drive me. To a meetup a couple of miles away. And when we get in the car, I could say, "Hey, get on the freeway." I don't have to give you any more instruction than that. You know how to get to the freeway. But once we're on the freeway, I will tell you, "Okay, it's the next off ramp." Then you'll get off there. Then I'll give you more details. Turn left here, turn right there, and soon we're at the place. If I could just tell you to go to that place and you know where that place is, then you would just do that. We navigate at the level of instruction that the person at the keyboard is able to work with. It may need to be very detailed, it could be very general. It's going to depend on what we're doing and who's working with us at that moment. But we use this basic concept. For an idea to go from someone's head into the computer, it must go through someone else's hands. And if we get good at that, then we can flow really nicely. But there's some tricks to it, and we'll talk about that just a little bit in a while. It's a little trickier when we're working remotely. We need to be a little tighter on our protocol that we use of interaction. When we're working, we typically have a keyboard that we're typing on, but when we introduce mob programming, we're going to have that concept of the driver, the person who's sitting at the keyboard. They'll take the instructions from the rest of the team, which essentially is navigators. The navigators are the ones thinking about where we're going, they're discussing it. The driver just keeps typing things as needed. And everybody on the team basically is a navigator, including the driver, except for when the driver's at the keyboard. We're going to rotate every few minutes. And remotely, we might want to have a longer rotation. I've been experimenting with a lot of things in the last 2 or 3 weeks, trying to find how to make this flow as good as possible. And it's a little different when we're working remotely. We used a timer. You don't necessarily need to use a timer. As we go through this, each individual, I'm going to run a little bit of an animation through this. It may not work very good remotely here, but as what you'll be able to see is each team member takes their turn at the driver's seat while the other members are guiding them through it and thinking about how whatever they're doing contributes to the overall effort. So we just keep these rotations going. And again, we might find a different way to do that when we're working remotely. But conceptually, when the driver is sitting at the keyboard, they're sort of a part of the computer. They're going to focus on understanding what is being asked of them and putting it in and not blocking that process. This helps the team stay in flow. And unfortunately, that driving position can block the flow if they're questioning things too much. Are you sure you want to do that? They might ask. Or don't you think it would be better if we do this? They might say. And we want to try to avoid that. Just act as the input operator and don't worry if they're not making the decisions you think we should be making right now. But there's no hard and fast rule. With the remote, we might want to loosen that up a little bit, or maybe not. Some people recommend the driver stays on mute. Let's go on a little bit. I think this kind of sums it up for me. Conceptually, the driver is a peripheral. They're part of the computer while they're at the driver's seat. So this allows the rest of the team to remain in the same context cognitively. So essentially, because we are working in the same context, we get to share the cognitive load. And that means we don't need to understand everything. Each individual just needs to keep focus on how their specialty contributes to what we're doing right now. Now, not every team is working completely cross-functional. So this will change depending on exactly how you set up your teams. But the basic idea is you don't need to understand everything that's going on. You do need to understand how you fit in. We're going to dialogue by talking and listening. We're going to hear each other's ideas. We'll talk about that quite a bit in a little bit here. We're going to use something like whiteboards, flip charts, sticky notes. Well, that's got to change when we're working remotely. We can still use whiteboards, and I've worked with several teams lately who have a camera or a phone in the meeting that's pointing at somebody's whiteboard, and they can write on the whiteboard and have everybody follow along that way. But that's not nearly as good as having a physical whiteboard everybody can get their hands on. Essentially, we're trying to share and integrate our ideas continuously. So, mob programming is sort of the continuous integration of ideas. That's something I heard Joshua Karieski say, and I really like that concept. We're trying to focus on contributing the right thing at the right time and in the right way. If we contribute every thought that we have, we're going to add too much noise, and that becomes even more apparent when we're remote working. So, we're going to be a little bit controlled. If an idea comes to us, and it's not the right time to share it, we don't share it at that moment. We might write it down to remind us ourselves or putting in a parking lot. Maybe we have an online shared document that we can just pop those ideas into and then go back and circle back to see those later. When we're working together, we have the whiteboard and the drawings and diagrams and sticky notes and 3x5 cards. So we got to figure out how we're going to do this online. And there are some pretty good online whiteboards. I'm experimenting with three or four. Every day I'm getting with different groups of people and trying out different things. I think we can do it. The online shared documents like Google Docs or something have worked really well for me for all kinds of purposes of sharing information that we can all type into and edit at the same time. I want to talk a little bit about skills now. So this is a kind of an issue when we're all programmers, or a lot of us are programmers, but whatever skills you're bringing to this development process, you might be a tester, you might be a product owner, you might be a manager of some sort. You might be maybe an expert in the database, and you don't write a lot of code in your job. But the skills we need to bring are really about how we interact with each other. So the hearing and the understanding others is one of the most important and critical parts of this, and we need to learn to listen. I'll address that a little bit later too. We're striving to understand what the other people are saying to us, what our team members are trying to say. So we have to give them space to talk. We have to be willing to try other people's ideas. I'll reiterate this later as well. This is part of how we learn and get rid of the misunderstandings we commonly have. Misunderstandings are a big problem in this modern world where we get so much information. The more information that we get, the more difficult it is to communicate because we have so many more opportunities for misunderstanding. So I'm going to go ahead here and talk about this. We need to open space for others to talk. This is important when we're co-located, but it's way more important when we're working remotely. We have to pace ourselves. So if we're with a group of 5 or 6 people, all in something like Zoom or whatever, and we're sharing a document or a code that we're working on, we don't want to speak. We want to speak in a more paced manner, and we want to make sure we're giving time for everybody to contribute. And again, we'll talk about that in a minute. We're going to need to practice these techniques. We don't just get good at this stuff by by working. We need to practice these things. I really suggest that we set aside time to have practice sessions. We're going to practice listening to each other, practice trying each other's ideas, practice opening space for people to talk. We're trying to build this shared understanding. What I mean by that is we're not necessarily trying to build a shared agreement initially. We need to get a shared understanding of what we're doing. And the agreement will come once we start trying things. We get to see a few things and then we can say, okay, I like this better than that. Um, Often, if we have competing ideas, we're going to want to try all the ideas. And that's how we get the understanding. I'm going to share a little bit about sharing ideas. um, it's not a competition. We're not trying to prove how good we are. We're trying to find the best results for the team. So I say, let's resist. Let's learn to resist trying to prove how good we individuals are. Never insist on doing things your own way. Again, we're trying to build a shared understanding. So if the rest of the team's willing to try our way, we need to be willing to try their way. Every team member, whoever has an idea, we need to be willing to try their idea, and then let's not insist that ours was the better one. We might think ours was the better one, and we might express that, but let's not insist on it. If the team decides to go one way or the other, don't feel too bad about it. In a few days, if we decide that the path we chose to go down isn't the best one, well, then that's a good time to round back to the other ideas we tried. But usually what happens once we've tried 2 or 3 ideas is a better idea comes forward. If we don't try them, we rarely come to that better idea. We have to try things to see what happens. So, this is important to me, to have a sustainable pace. And I think I'm gonna, for our special circumstances right now, it doesn't have to do with remote working or co-located working, but just the place the world is in right now. We really need to pay a lot of attention to our personal health, and that means we don't wanna be too hard on each other. We wanna make it easy for everyone to feel relaxed, make it easy for our teammates to get through all the other stresses they're dealing with without us adding stress to their life. So we use this, at our original team, the idea of consideration, kindness, consideration, and respect, and I think that's more important now than ever. I already mentioned this. You don't need to understand everything. That puts too much of a burden on us. Uh, Try to understand where the team is at with what we're doing, and be paying attention to where your contribution is important. And team members, when you know, like let's say we're starting to get into a space where we think we might need to store some data, let's make sure we're getting the ideas from the database expert for that stuff, so that let's make it inclusive. Let's make sure we hear all those voices. We got to take care of ourselves and each other, and this is something I learned a while back. Take breaks before you think you need them. With several teams I'm working with right now, we'll go about 45 minutes and then take a 15-minute break. We just need to decompress a little bit, maybe go get a something to eat or a drink or whatever. But you don't need to always take your breaks as a team when you're working remotely. It's very easy for an individual to go off. Just note that by, well, everybody maybe will see that you're not there if you're using a shared conferencing interface, and you can see when the other people are in camera. That's one thing some people are recommending. Keep your cameras always on. That's not a bad idea. Some people don't like that, but you work it out on your team. I'm going to share a few other things that are really important, again, more now than ever with the remote working, because the basic issue right now is it's going to be harder and harder for us to understand what each other is saying. So when someone isn't understanding you, then assume that it's you and not them, and find an alternative way to make your point. So that's why using the shared documents can be really good, or a shared drawing area, or something like that. At first, you might just repeat what you said because they couldn't clearly hear you. Maybe it was garbled. And then once you know that they have heard you and they're still not understanding, find an alternative way to make your point, but be patient. It's important. You'll often hear people say something like, I just said that. This happens because not everybody's listening to everything at the same time. We're not paying attention evenly to everything that's going on. Another thing that's related is somebody will say, hey, that was my idea. And that's okay. Just accept it that somebody had said that. You may not have heard them saying it or sharing that. Uh, so it doesn't matter who gets credit for the ideas. So let's all just give each other credit whenever it's appropriate to. Hey, yeah, okay, that's great. Let's give it a try. Let's talk about psychological safety. More important now than ever, we want to include and honor every voice and make it easy and safe for people to share their ideas. This means a couple things. You need to listen better than you've ever listened before. And this is the tip that I like to share because it's helped me be a better listener. It's that if we listen as if the next thing that they say is the most important thing that you'll ever hear, that helps us keep a little bit better focus. It's certainly worked well for me. And try the ideas. As soon as we say we're not going to try that, someone else's idea, if we say, "Oh, that won't work because of this," and that person still wants to try their idea, let's try their idea, because as soon as we don't try the ideas, people will stop contributing. They'll stop engaging. So let's keep everybody involved and try all the ideas. You got to figure out what works best for you. I can't tell you what's going to work best for you. You got to practice and try these things. You got to figure this out for your own team. You can choose what's best for you, but only if you try things. So pay attention to what everybody's tweeting and blog posting about working remotely now, see what the ideas are and try some of them. Some of the things I'm sharing with you today. You can change it as needed. Don't ever say, this is the way we work. We're not going to change it. Be aware that better things will be constantly coming up. You're going to be learning to do this better over the next few weeks and months. About the time we don't need to work remotely anymore, we'll be experts at it, right? So try things, reflect, tune, and adjust. And that means we're going to do retrospectives. Just a quick word about it right now. Do them more frequently than you normally would. Now, again, remember, I'm not really telling you what you should do or whether or not to do it. This is how I'm operating. Let's do those retrospectives more frequently. For a long time, I've been doing them daily. At the end of the day, a very short retrospective about what went well today. But now I'm attempting to do them at the end of every session. So we might go, let's say, a 2 hour session after we've taken a break or two. Then we will just reflect back over the session and say, well, what went well? What do we want to change? But do it whatever works for you. It doesn't have to be a long retrospective, but if we pay attention in real time, that will be a big advantage for us. So I'm going to skip a little bit forward here. The idea of a just in time just means that if somebody notices something while we're working and it's important to bring it forward, just mention it. You can put it on a post-it note, put it in the parking lot, so to speak, or you can actually stop the work and talk about the thing that you need to reflect on right now. Let's not lose those opportunities to turn up the good. Every time we notice something good, let's focus on that and figure out how we can get more of it. Make it easy to do our daily work. That's our goal. Let's make it as easy as possible to work this way. So here's the quick start things. We got plenty of time. So I'll have lots of time for answers, I think, to your questions today. The remote quick start guide, one of the things I think is important is start with the simple things. Start with the basics and practice on exercises. If you don't have time to practice on exercises, then I would recommend that you find some simple and contained thing to start with. I worked with a team a few little bit ago, and they just didn't have time. They felt to practice on simple exercises, so we started with the easy bug fixes. I just said, "Show me a couple bug fixes you think are going to be easy. Let's work as a team on those, so we can learn the ins and outs of interacting with each other." We can increase the difficulty a little at a time. And within a few weeks, we're really working on the most difficult things, no problem. But we need to learn those interaction skills, consider our protocols, consider how our systems can be set up. And it's easier to focus on that when we're working on the easy things than when we're working on the hard things. Team size, a lot of people want to talk about team size. And I think with remote, at first, it might be a little easier to start with a smaller group. So if you would normally work in your workplace with 5 or 6 people, maybe start with 2 teams of 3 or something like that, just to practice these skills on some easy stuff first. I think that you could do it with 5 or 6 if you're a good, well functioning team and you're already used to working that way. But learning the ins and outs of remote, you might want to start smaller. Or you can start with pairing. Now, pairing I think is actually more difficult, but in the remote world where we're just trying to learn how to, mute ourselves and unmute ourselves and how to show what we want to show, pairing can be a good environment to work with. What's important is the equipment and the team interaction. These things need to work well. So we need to practice them and get us there. I have been working with several teams now, have 6 or 7 people, and it's working very smoothly, but we practiced the basics first. I think practicing is a good thing. I'm going to go through a couple different slides talking about equipment. Clearly, we need to have fast internet connections if possible, but I want to share this. I was down in Brazil at a hotel that had terrible Wi-Fi and was barely operating at all, and we were able to do this using remote techniques of being paced and taking our time. And there's several things we can do about it, but it's better to have the fast internet to get a connection and to have really powerful computers. If you don't have that, then you're hobbling yourself or you're sabotaging yourself. But whatever you have right now is going to be good enough because this was sort of an emergency situation to get remote. But when you get time, get better equipment. We need to understand what do we need to share, and how are we going to do that? And I'm going to show you a couple uh, brands and things to try. I've been trying everything that's out there, and we need to be able to do keyboard sharing, but that's the wrong thing. It's not so much keyboard sharing, is that we need to be able to access the the same uh, the same material online. And if we're going to be editing a file together, we're not necessarily going to be doing keyboard sharing, but we need some way to have access to that same document, and we can both have easy editing of it. There's going to be differences in environments. If some people have Macs and some people have Windows, some people have Linux. What I kind of am saying here is we need to find a way that those differences don't make a problem for us. And so I'll share a couple ideas. And again, the drawings and whiteboards. Uh, I think I got a slide on that, but right now I'll just say I'm trying 3 different or 4 different products, including Mural and Miro and Lucid and Cardboard IT and a couple other things. Yeah, I'm trying them. They all have their different advantages. I think there's some pretty good things out there. We need to figure that out. The shared docs for notes and images. If you have a shared environment that you can all edit the same doc at the same time, that works out really well. I'm going to talk about audio for a minute. Here we are in a space where, our private homes are now public spaces. And so we want to kind of get ourselves in a spot where we won't have too much background noise, but use your mute. Only turn on to speak. Uh, get a good, I don't know how this is working right now, but this little earbud things or whatever they call this seem to be working pretty good. Find maybe a unidirectional mic that you have, order one up if you need to. Find ways to make it so it's really easy for the others not to hear your background noise. So avoiding these things are important. I like to have headphones and headsets. They usually work pretty good. A good quality microphone is very important. I've been in some meetings where some people have a very tinny sound, others have a very nice and moderated tone. Let's go for the better sound and let's share with each other what we're using so we can figure that out. Use whatever works best with your environment. I've tried all kinds. I've got like 6 different headsets here right now, and some of them work fine, some of them don't. Some of them my computer tends to ignore when I plug them in, and figuring all that out is important. We won't talk about the headphone splitter right now. So, as far as being at the same computer, we have to be able to share the screen and the keyboard. And I've been using and trying out all of these tools. Right now, I really am preferring Zoom, but I believe Whereby, which I've tried, works extremely good. The GoToMeeting I've used in some environments where the internet connection was very slow and it worked very well. Some people are using TeamViewer and logging everybody into the same instance of a server somewhere. That seems to work extremely well without lag and other problems. I haven't used Skype in a while. I've used Google Hangout Meet, and there are other things as well. I'm not making a recommendation necessarily, but I'm mostly using Zoom. It has a lot of great features like breakout rooms and some of the uh, things that make meetings really easy to do. You can do polls. You have a whiteboard you can share. No, I haven't learned how to use it well yet, but things like that. So get rid of the lag, good keyboard sharing. So we talked about all this, didn't we? Good communication protocols. That's how we're going to interact with each other. We rotate by check-in, check-out. This is something a bunch of people are using right now, and I found that works really well. If somebody's at the keyboard, let's say for 10 or 15 minutes, when their turn is done, they check in their code. The next person checks out their code and shares their screen. And this way we get rid of the lag because we're working in our own environments on our local computer. That works pretty good. As a matter of fact, I'm experimenting with that a lot this last week, and I think that I'm starting to really like this model. It works pretty well. The protocols of speaking, let's really try not to have side conversations right now. If you need to talk to someone, find another, maybe you can, talk through a FaceTime or something, uh, find some other way than having those side conversations in our group. You might find with a protocol you come up with that will work later, but for right now, I'm saying just experiment not having side conversations. So always let people finish their ideas, not just their sentences. This is important when we're working remotely because often an idea takes more than a sentence. It can take 2 or 3 sentences. People are forming their idea as they talk. Be patient with them. Let them share their ideas. They'll think better. You'll get a better understanding. I think that's worth practicing right now. I already mentioned this. Hold your thoughts, make a note, share later if still needed. Sometimes you want to comment on something somebody's saying right now. That will just block the conversation. If it's still important after they're completely done, then bring that thing up. We already talked about that. And this last thing, contribute the right thing at the right time and in the right way. Use that, copy that down. It's worked really well for me. You might want to try it. Always be thinking, if I share this thing right now, will that help these things out? Or am I just trying to make my point? Or do I think that my thing is more important than the other thing? So let's wait before we share our ideas if we need to. This is sort of the last slide that I want to go through. I was experimenting with hand signals. Some one of the ones is if you hold up a finger and you're not speaking because someone else is speaking, that you hold your finger, that kind of indicates I have a point I want to make. And if you hold up a finger on each hand, then that's kind of saying it's really an important thing, but it's allowing the other person to share to save their time or finish their time. Somebody should be paying attention when the conversation drifts away from what's being said right now. Somebody should be able to point out, hey, it looked like Tim or Sally had this thing they wanted to share. Do you still want to do that? So let's pay attention, open the space for each other. The communication cards, I've been experimenting with that. Is there are several available, but you can make your own out of post-it notes or 3x5s. It's a way to hold up something like saying, please slow down, or can't hear you, you're garbled, or whatever. If the visual communication is happening in your meeting, then or in your mobbing, you can hold up your card so that the visual communication happens without us polluting the voice space. And I think I'm at the last slide that I wanted to cover. Yep, that brings us to the end. I have another 100 slides here that we could talk about all sorts of things, but I think this is a good time to kind of, in a way, wrap up this part of what I'm talking about and maybe get to some questions people might have. So I'm not sure how to proceed with that. I think that somebody's going to be sharing, be looking at the questions that people might have been asking, and then they'll relay them to me. Well, I can just go on with some more slides too. I'll wait a minute longer.
Okay, so are you finished with it?
Yeah. So would you like me to stop sharing my screen or how would you like me to proceed here?
You can finish with it if you want to.
So, well, my slide talk is done
Yes, but
and I'm
yeah,
prepared to answer questions.
it's such a
So,
nice illustration, so I think it's great to have it there. It's your wife that
okay.
did it, right?
Yeah, my wife Andrea is a children's book author and illustrator. As a matter of fact, I don't know if anybody will see this. I'm going to hold it up. Here's something she's working on. Can you see that?
Yeah,
She
that's
loves
lovely.
to, she's always drawing and painting, and I'm in her workspace right now because in this area of the house, I get a better internet connection. So that's why I'm sitting here.
We have to share with each other. It's a good thing. So I just want to say, first of all, thank you so much for your session. I think it was very inspiring, not just for mob programming, but for remote programming overall. It's a lot of
Yes,
great tips. What I will take with me was two things. It's not about working faster; it's about working better. I really like that
yes.
one. And something that I really need to think about is take breaks before you think you need them. That one was a great one.
Oh, thank you.
So we have a couple of questions. Um, First of all, we got a question that was, there is no hard and fast rule. What does that mean exactly? And
Okay,
we,
so go ahead, go ahead.
oh, I just wanted to say that we did get an explanation in the chat, but I would like to hear your view on it as well.
Yeah, so a hard and fast rule just means a rule that we take as being unchangeable. So just like with best practices, people will say, "Oh, these are the best practices," but there is no really best practice because there is always a way to improve any practice we have. So the saying hard and fast rule just means this rule is unbreakable. We can't break this rule. And I'm just trying to say for myself, I'm not willing to allow a hard rule or a rule that's unbreakable. I usually will think of them as being candidate rules. When I'm facilitating a team, I want to make sure that we don't become complacent about the rules that we have in place. So, like if we have a team agreement, I would say our team agreement is always open to change. And in the particular case I was sharing was about the rotation that the driver cannot speak, or usually we would ask only the driver asks a clarifying question, like, "Did you mean line 13 or line 23?" So I don't have a problem allowing the person at the keyboard to actually participate more when we're working remotely, although we would want to experiment that. If it seems to be breaking our flow, then maybe we want to make sure that the driver mostly stays on mute. The driver is the person at the keyboard. So again, all I was saying was, I don't hold rules as being unbreakable. We need to reflect on it and make changes if needed.
Mm. Seems like a good approach. As for the second question, it's are you saying that all people are navigators instead of a single navigator and a mob?
Yes, so we're all there to be navigators. We're not all shouting out something at the same time. So if there's 5 people that we've gathered together, it's because they have all the skills and knowledge we need to write this software. And so each person should be able to navigate when their specialty is needed. Let's just say when we're doing some kind of work with the database, then the database expert is going to be the navigator at that moment. If we're working on some front end stuff, there's a good chance that the front end expert is going to be the one navigating, and someone else is going to be at the keyboard. So sometimes that is a little hard for people to imagine. Well, how if I'm not familiar with these database tools that we're using or with how to write front end code, how can I be useful if I'm at the keyboard? But the important thing is we're communicating our ideas, and when the same person is using their ideas at the keyboard, in other words, they're the ones with the idea we're going to implement, and at the same time they're at the keyboard, we're not communicating very fully. Now this was not an intro to mob programming. I gave a short intro. In my longer intro to mob programming, what we are learning about is the idea that once we get good at having the person with the expertise navigating, it flows very nicely. So but everybody's there because they have skills that they will need to help others do, and we're thinking at the same time. So let me give an example. Let's say the front end person is guiding some work we're doing, and there's going to be a couple drop downs. And once those drop downs are people selected stuff, there's going to be some options that will appear. Now the database person may saying, well, where are we storing those options? And so that means in real time, they're paying attention to, is that going to be in some cache or is that going to have to go to the database and things like that. So we're having these, we're in the same context, we're seeing the same things happening in front of us, but we're all viewing it from a different perspective. And this is very important. So everybody's a navigator, but we're staying in the same context so we can contribute our bit at just the right moment.
Okay. Third question. First of all, it says great question, great session, Woody. Thank you very much.
Oh, I'm really enjoying this. I hope it's helpful.
What mic are you using for this stream? Very crisp and nice sound.
My mic?
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad that's good because I've really been trying. This is just like one of these little. I think it came with my uh, Apple iPhone a couple versions back when they used to have the little regular jack plug. So
Yeah,
it's just um, a phone style headset. And I
that's
don't
great.
even know if you can buy these anymore because this version, my newer phone has one of those, uh, uh, you know, it's the different plug.
Yeah, exactly.
So
Oh, sometimes you take what you have and it works out great.
yeah.
Another question here. How do you convey empathy remotely? This is what I miss the most right now and what I've noticed leads to friction in my team working remotely.
So I'm going to ask that you give me that question again, but I wanted to say one other thing about the mic I'm using. My
Okay.
house is very quiet right now. I think this little mic that I'm using picks up a lot of noise all around because it's not unidirectional.
Yeah.
This may not work very good if there was ambient noise around me. Like sometimes my grandson, who's now 4, is visiting, and he's going to be singing in the other room or playing with a game. And this, I don't think, blocks that stuff. So I just want to let you know this is great when it's a quiet room, but I don't think it's very good. I've had trouble with it when there's noise going on around.
Yeah, I
So,
think
so go ahead. Yeah.
I was just gonna say that I have the same problem. I have my dog snoring in the background, so you can probably pick that up as well.
It's like we are all realizing now our private spaces are now public.
Exactly. Okay, so do you want me to do the question again, or
Yes, please.
okay? So the question was, how do you convey empathy remotely? This is what I miss the most all the time because, oh, sorry, this is what I miss the most right now, and what I've noticed leads to friction in my team working remotely.
Yeah, and I wish I had a really direct answer, but I think a part of what I was saying through this whole talk is that we need to find a different pace than we're used to and really focus on the listening. And part of empathy is listening. A big part of empathy is listening. So I think that this is important to do. I have been trying to be on my best behavior and really listen to people in the meetings and the mob programming that I'm involved with. Uh, but there are other things. Of course, we will still have some impatience in our voice. If we can learn to be less frustrated when we're in these difficult environments and constantly maybe relaxing ourselves, like doing short meditations frequently, and just learn to be patient, that's something we can do for each other. Yeah, I don't have a great way to how to express it. Am constantly with my teams watching for the people who are, clearly not dealing with the stress as well of
Mm.
everything that we've got going on. I want to I got to clarify this just a little bit. I think because most of us have not worked remotely a lot, this is stressful itself to do. And we have to understand that not just for us, but for our teammates. My wife and I, we worked together for many years in a business we had, 20 years or so. And she frequently had to remind me if somebody else is acting frustrated or tense or getting loud or not behaving what you would consider in a polite manner with you, it may have nothing to do with you. It may have to do with some other stresses in their life right now. Never assume it's about you. So this is a yeah, I don't have any I'm not a psychologist or I'm not a I'm just sharing the way that I'm thinking about it. I'm doing my best to be patient and hear the other voices. That's but I wish I could give you a better I'll give that some consideration. Maybe the next time I talk I'll have some better things to share about that.
But I think it's a really good place to start to think and to be mindful of others and try to have more patience. That's always a good place to start.
So I want to share a little idea that our team did when we were first, uh, when we came up with the concept that we need to treat each other with kindness, consideration, and respect. We had just introduced a new person to the team who had not come through everything we did as we grew as a team. So they were having trouble interacting as following the protocols that we had developed for ourselves, and we hadn't been very good at sharing how those protocols help. So when in a few interactions, some people were getting frustrated, we decided to have a little retrospective meeting where we all got off to the side together to discuss how we want to be treated, and we came up with those 3 words: I want to be treated with kindness, consideration, and respect. And then we realized to for each of us to be treated that way means the others have to treat us that way. And this is what we decided to do. And a lot of you have heard me speak before, you will have heard this story. But what we decided to do, somebody brilliantly said, well, we really don't know how to do this, or we'd already be doing it. So let's just pretend for a day to be the good people we want to be. And just simply pretending to be a good person helped a lot. And we continued that for more than several days. And eventually, people on the team started reading articles about, well, how do you listen better? Or how do you express your ideas better? Or how do you learn to understand someone else's ideas better. How do you use the whiteboard? We were learning ways, but we started out by just pretending to be the more patient, kind, and wonderful people that we wish we were. And that worked pretty good.
Fake it till you make it.
Fake it till you make it. And that's a very bold example of that. It
And
worked
also
well for us.
being kind and being compassionate is it's also contagious. I mean, it's not only viruses
Oh,
that is contagious. So
that's good.
it's
That's yeah. Thank you for
okay.
sharing that.
We have more questions.
Sure.
What do you recommend if one participant has to be muted most of the time because they are sharing sound space with other family members working from home?
Well, so for starters, everybody could be muted all the time and only unmute to speak. So that's okay as long as because we're trying to pace. And actually, I don't think it's a bad thing to have everybody on mute because our conversations have to be more focused. Now, I've been using the push to talk with some of the systems. If you mute yourself and you hold down the space bar, that unmutes and you can talk. And then when you release, so let's say we have 5 people on the team, everybody's muted, somebody's coding something and somebody wants to talk, they unmute themselves, they make their comment, they put themselves back on mute. When you see them go back to mute, that could be a signal that I'm done saying the things I want to say. And if we make that our protocol, then there's a paced way to do this. If we so you, sometimes you just need to be muted all the time, but I would say that person who has to be muted all the time just because there's ambient noise, we might want to find a mic for them that's a completely unidirectional and only picks up within a foot or two of the area. I don't know how perfect mics are. I've been using a what is it called, a blue yeti, one of those, the higher level one, and for some of the things I've been doing, and it seems to work pretty good. You can switch it between different styles of mic. Many years ago, I used to use these very focused unidirectional mics before this computer need came about for some other recording. That's a good thing to experiment with. Right now, we're just making do with whatever we have. Whatever you got at home, you use it. Uh, Maybe we all need, like in the old Get Smart TV show. Most of you won't remember that, but they had a cone of silence that they could lower down over somebody, and then they would be in a completely private atmosphere. Although it never worked in the show, that was part of the joke of it. But technology is difficult. We
Yeah,
need to figure that out. I don't have an
I,
easy answer except for this idea of always on mute, unless you have something to say.
I think that many of us would want that cone of silence, regardless of working remotely or not, from
Yeah,
time to
very
time.
good point.
Have you tried Visual Studio Live Share for remote mobile programming?
Yeah, I should have added that to my slides there. It works really good for some things, but I'm trying to work out some details right now. I'm actually communicating a little bit with the people who write the product because I think they realize this is a great time for them to learn more about how people want to use that. They've actually told me they're adding features or have added features for mob programming, so I'd like to learn more about that from them. But I like it, and it's good for certain things. Uh, I think that with the code check in and check out, uh, it kind of eliminates the need necessarily for that. However, I would say that there's some things we need to figure out. If we're using the live share, then we just need to figure out our protocol. But I would again say it's worth experimenting with. So whatever you're currently using and you want to try some other things, set aside an hour or so every day to experiment with your team about the new things you want to try. There's lots of videos online and instructions for using VS Code and Live Share. So I'm really on accelerated a path right now to try and learn more about it myself. I like what it's doing. The people that I really think have uh, come up with a quick solution are the ones who are using something like Team Viewer or whatever, where everything's on a server in a secure location at their or on the cloud or wherever, and everybody can log into the same instance. So you can use your own tools that you and preferences with your equipment, and this helps us get rid of the problems with working between a Mac and a Windows machine and a Linux machine. So yeah, I think live share is worth experimenting with, and I bet you they're going to be improving it a great deal, day by day even. So let's all keep each other informed. If you find a tool that's working well, share it through a blog post or tweet it out or something. We need to collaborate across the whole world right now in how to improve our processes. I would say this is really critical. This is the time for everyone in the world to come together and help each other. This is an important thing.
That's very true. Um, Another question here. Does this
Certainly.
mo does this mode of programming require that everyone in the quote unquote mob is an expert?
I didn't quite understand. Can you rephrase it or clarify it?
Um, oh, this is my interpretation of the question, but if you do mob programming, does it require that everyone participate is an expert?
Well, no, not at all. You will all have different expertise. You will also bring to it your own approach to solving problems. I believe my experience tells me this. I want some more junior people, if that's the right term, some less experienced people. And often we just work with what we have. If we've got somebody on the team, I worked with this way for a while with a team. We had somebody on the team who was an intern. They had learned to program in the school, but had no practical experience with it. And we found that their contributions were still very, very useful to the team because we're looking at things from a different perspectives. I'll give a little warning to those of us who have been programming a long time. We often get a fixed set of solutions. So when we see a problem, we get out of our brain the common answer that we would have used, and it's usually not necessarily the best one. It's just the one that will draw out of our experience quickly. And when we have a more, I would say, a more of a novice or a newbie or someone who's not as much of an expert, they are looking from a different point of view. Some people call this the beginner's mind. But the basic idea is I want those different points of view. When we have an intern, we will get better and clearer solutions to things because it's sparking our own thinking. I want to share it this way, that the new person is looking at from a completely different perspective, adds value to our own perspective. And so what we would do for a while, and I think they might still be doing this, is this concept that if two ideas have been shared, we'll try the more junior person's idea first, because that will give us more learning than trying the kind of proven solution. So yeah, I want all expertise, but we work with what we have. If our database person is purely 100% expert, but our front end person is still learning the how to do it, and that's what we got, that's what we got. And we'll work with what we have. I've done this throughout the years now for 20, 30 years that I've never been given the opportunity to come onto a team and decide the expertise that we need to have and bring those people to the team. Usually, I've been told, "Here's the team you're going to work with," and you just work with what you've got. I respect everybody's point of view. I want to hear every voice, and that includes the beginners, maybe at least as much as the more experienced people.
That's a
I think
very sensible approach, I must say.
I think I have one other thing I want to add as well. I
Go
was
ahead.
working with a team just in the last few days where the two more advanced people kept wanting to discuss some fine point of something. And this is something that happens to developers a lot. They will talk. I'm going to try and do hand signals. I don't know if you can see this, but they'll talk past each other. And this is it's good to facilitate ourselves. Someone on the team has hopefully a little better skills and will be able to notice when that talking past each other happens so they can get people back to trying to understand each other instead of insisting on making their point. Sometimes you can think of this as some people say it as being in violent agreement with each other. When we're in violent agreement with each other, we're kind of saying the same things in two different ways, and we need to pay attention to that happening. When we're working with a team, there's usually somebody on the team that's pretty gentle and good at pointing that out, maybe later in private to help us improve ourselves. I love it when I have somebody on the team who's very gentle with me and comes to me later and says, "Hey, in that interchange we had, you were being too pushy, or you weren't expressing yourself very clearly." So maybe I've given too much of an answer, but you all know it's a bargain when you talk to me because for any question you have, I'll give you at least two, maybe three answers. Yeah,
That's a really good bargain.
that was a joke.
Mm.
I hope everybody understands.
I think so. Um, okay, we have more questions if you have time.
Yeah, I'll go on as long as you like. As
Oh,
long as
I
people
love
want to
that.
stay, we'll do that.
Great. So another question we got was regarding screen state. So it seems like screen state is a problem when both coding, timer, and communication are using your screen. Is this a
Yeah.
real problem, and what should we do to fix it?
Well, if we're using a shared environment, usually uh, it's good to have a lot more on our screen than we're used to. Remind me of that in a moment because I want to address a bigger issue with this. So, what I've been trying to do is have dual monitors at least. So a lot of our laptops and stuff are working from home. Maybe don't have enough resources inside them to run a couple monitors well. I have one monitor here that's huge, used for doing artwork editing and stuff, and my laptop just won't drive it. It sucks up all the resources in the computer. So if you get a decent couple monitors, have just like you would like to have anyways, dual monitors. Use that if you can. If you're just working on a laptop monitor, you'll be a little bit less capable screen space wise. So yeah, let's figure that one out. I do sometimes put part of the meeting into my phone, and I use the phone for me talking and for me watching other people's faces. I put it on a little. Matter of fact, right now I've got my phone on a little stand separate so I can see what's going on. And then I put my environment on my computer, unless I need to share my environment. But I can. So these are some of the options. But I want to speak to this other thing about the number of screens. I think conceptually, there's a lot more material we need than just a couple monitors showing our shared documents and showing the people. Uh, and I haven't completely resolved that yet. I think we're losing some fidelity, if that's the right word. We're losing some of the things that naturally are clear to us when we're working in the same room. Like right now, if I were to stand up to go to the other room to get a cup of coffee, you all kind of sense it that this is going on, and you don't try to include me in the conversation because you go, "Oh yeah, in your mind, Woody's not here this moment." But when we're in this mixed environment or this remote environment, you can't really sense these things. If I get out of the picture, you might think I'm not there at all, but I could just be standing up to stretch. So I think there's a lot missing in our remote environments, and we need a protocol to deal with it. One of the things I did in a meeting the other day was I replaced my image with something that said, "I'm on a break," so that when I went in the other room, they knew I was on a break. So you don't need to be interrupting the conversation to tell people you're on a break. Now, the chat area, a lot of people I see using the chat area right now, not everyone's paying attention to the chat area in your system. So we need to figure these protocols out, and each team can do that for themselves. Just remember, you need to consider that.
As always, it's a matter of being or communicating even more, being over communicating. It's never a bad thing, I
Yeah.
guess.
Yeah, and doing it in a paced way. Figuring
Mm,
out how to do this without interrupting conversations, but where it's clear what's going on. There's I don't think there's a known perfect way to do this yet. We're
no.
all going to experiment with it. Share your ideas. I've been doing these live sessions, trying to do them every day. I'll probably do one later where I just invite people to my work area and we just code on something or I talk about mob programming. In these is where I'm trying to experiment with different ways of doing this stuff, giving each member of the team a voice, breaking out into separate breakout rooms to discuss things separately for a little bit, all kinds of things. So there's techniques, we need to discover them and use them. And there's a lot of people that have been doing this for years, sharing their stuff in blog posts and short videos online. Take advantage of that. There's a lot of brilliant people who really understand remote work, uh, and I think that's a good thing.
Mm.
Any more questions?
There are some more. Um, do you have any tips to ease the Big Brother slash demo gods pressure and stress on the driver?
Oh, I might need to get a better understanding of that question. Can you?
Well, when you're supposed to be the driver and you kind either get nervous or you feel like you're under surveillance because everyone is watching you, and there might be when you demo something and suddenly everything goes wrong and technology stops working. So it's kind of a pressing and stressful situation. Do you have any
Yes.
tips to handle that?
Okay, so first of all, when we're at the keyboard and the rest of the team is watching what we're doing, which is how mob programming normally goes, we do need to realize that if we give too much or too quick of information to the person at the keyboard, they'll just get confused. And they can't listen to five people contributing at once. This is different than when we're sitting together, because when we're sitting together, we can kind of back off a little bit. We're still paying attention to the screen, but the navigators can be having quieter conversations while the person at the keyboard's keying in the next couple lines. It doesn't take a lot of focus or a lot of quietness for that developer to do that work. But now that we got the sounds are stuck in our ears and we're going to hear everything everybody says, we need to pace ourselves a little bit better. So if we're actually directing or navigating somebody at the keyboard, we're not going to be having as much conversation going on besides just that navigation. When they're done with the typing, we review what happened, and then we open up a little bit more in the conversation. This is just part of a protocol you need to work out for yourselves, but that's one of the things I've been finding works good. But if we're just doing a demo and something might go wrong, that's all of us have to be very forgiving. We have to hopefully we let's maybe every chance we get, we pointed out that any of us, when we're in front of everyone else, we're going to make mistakes. Things are going to go wrong. Don't worry about it. But if we're doing it to a bigger group, like in a meeting that's not our team, then I would say, as a facilitator, I would always point that out. It's like, remember, things could go wrong. This person at the keyboard is doing the best they can. Let's not sweat it. We're going to feel more impatient right now than we maybe normally do because we're used to things in our normal environment going smoothly. But I have no really great advice for this. I'm really experimenting with it too. Be kind to each other. Really be kind to each other. We get flustered easily. We spent 15 minutes earlier this morning putting together our environment for doing this presentation today. And practicing that was really, really useful to us. We were able to work out the kinks or work out the problems. So test what you're going to do many more times than you normally would doing a demo with a couple kind souls, people on your team. If you're needing to do a demo to a larger group who's expecting, they don't want to waste their time. They're expecting things to go good. Somebody on the team can introduce it, like I just said, that we know problems can happen. Let's be patient, but also let's practice ahead of time. There's a famous speaker, management guru, and his name is Tom Peters, and people are always complimenting him on the talk that he gave or whatever. He's somebody who's way up, well known all around the world, written a lot of books, and he says, "Hey, every time I got to give a talk, I practice it 100 times." So you think I'm really good? No, I'm not. I just have to, I drill myself to do the thing that I need to do. So we don't often have time to do 100 times, but practice a little bit first can help. And even that just tells us, even the big experts we all admire, they make mistakes too. I hope that helps. I hope.
I think so. And going back to one of the earlier questions about how to convey empathy, I must say that, well, my reflection that is be like Woody, because on every answer that you have to these questions, I think that you show a lot of empathy, and
So
that's
let me
probably
share
key too.
something Let me share something about myself. I'm not easy to get along with. I'm easily frustrated. I, um, I'm an impatient person. And anybody who had worked for me when I was, younger, 20 years ago, would tell you I was a jerk. So I've had to practice these things and practice these things and learn to be more aware. I'm not a very self-aware person, and I often don't notice how I'm affecting other people. So, yeah, there's hope for everyone because I was really terrible at this stuff. So don't think I'm a good role model. My entire life, I've not been. I've really worked at it the last 20 years, and I'm trying my best. I think we can all improve.
Of course, we are all humans and we all continue to develop all the time. But just having
Yes.
that mindset of wanting to develop is a good start. So
So,
there's,
yeah,
oh,
let's
sorry,
continue on.
continue.
Sure.
Yeah, we have four
Mm,
more questions if you
sure.
have
Let's do
time.
that.
Mm? So one person is wondering what types of projects would you recommend the mob programming for, and how big would you go?
Oh, so big you might mean the size of the team?
I guess either size of the team or how big the project is
Well,
itself.
so we work on huge projects as individuals, right? So, we're used to working as alone on any size of a project. We just divide up the work between the people, but now we're dividing up it differently. If we have on a huge project and there's 10 mob programming teams working on it, that's perfectly okay. We do have a little bit less of a problem with dependencies when we're working on these teams because now we're not waiting for individuals to finish things for us to do our work or to have a talk with them. We're waiting maybe to communicate with another team. That cross team communication is much easier now. Just an example, in many environments I've worked where there's multiple teams working on the same project, they've nicely usually decoupled things, so there's not a lot of dependencies across the teams. An individual can that maybe has some expertise that's on a different team. We might go over to that team and say, "Hey, when they get a chance, we need to learn something that we don't yet know about or have some questions." And usually they can let that person come over. It's a little easier to have people moving around as needed when the time comes. And I recommend really highly that we learn how to interact as team to team rather than individual to individual. But because we've been working as solo programmers all of our lives, these are skills we need to develop that we're not ready to use yet. Matter of fact, a lot of people will say they prefer to work alone, but that's because they never learned how to work with other people. We actually are always collaborating in all the work we do. We just don't realize how poorly we're collaborating when we're working solo. We are introducing communication problems by working solo. And if we learn to work as a team, we really get rid of those. But there was a first part to that question that I think I didn't quite understand. Could you repeat that?
The first part was what types of projects would you
Types of
recommend?
projects.
Mm.
So, on our first team, we worked on a wide variety of projects. So the nature of the projects being a web app or a phone app or whatever, that all worked out just as well. The nature of the team of the work as being, is this a business application? Is this a game? Those things don't matter. All of that will be fine as well. So I don't think there's any work that a team does that the individuals do that couldn't also be done as a team. And we thought originally that it had more to do with the big problems than the small things. But we found that if, as a team, we tackle all things that come to us, we got a better result. We were sharing knowledge, we were getting things done quicker, and we were having fun at it. That's good stuff. Matter of fact, I think the biggest thing that we noticed was that the work was getting done directly so that we weren't having the disruptions and the context switching that you get when you work solo and you're waiting to get an answer from someone else. Then you have to, work on something else. So now you're multitasking until you get the answer back. Then you switch back to the other thing. And it's so much better if we're just working as a team, uh, no matter what we're doing. But that doesn't mean that's going to be for everybody. Remember, I'm not telling you what to do. I'm sharing with you my observations and what we did. And now that I'm working with teams all over the world every day, I'm finding this collaboration to be highly effective. So I think any kind of work.
Good. It's just a matter of experimenting and trying. trying new thoughts.
Absolutely. Matter of fact, one of the pictures that I share in one of my talks is of a group of doctors and technicians doing an operation, and there's 3 actual surgeons in this particular operation. And you say, "Why do you need 3 surgeons?" Well, there's different expertises that need to be taken advantage of. And why so many technicians? Well, they each have their high experience in certain things. They can't share, they don't know everything about everything, but one person's an expert at the keeping the patient's heart rate at the right rate
Mm,
during this. And another one's expertise is what tools does the doctor need for the surgery? And they've
mm,
got them all prepared and so on. So in many lines of work, working as a team is sometimes the only way to go. It's sometimes the
exactly.
only way to go.
Mm. But how do you handle a situation when nobody in the team really knows how to solve a particular problem? For example, if no one is experienced with using that library or technology or not familiar with the domain.
So this is the world that software development is, right? Every if we had all the expertise we needed to do everything that we ever do, then we would probably be getting behind the rest of the industry really quick because things are changing around us all the time. So one of the maybe the most important aspect of software development is that we need to be good at learning things. So I want to make it clear there's 2 different kinds of aspects to this, 2 different kinds of knowledge. One is the knowledge that we can get for ourselves by watching a video, reading a blog post, or experimenting with some new library that we have. And if there's nobody else with that expertise nearby that we can call in, then that's what we do. But there's other things that we can't look up or watch a video. For example, if we're reading our requirements document or the story that we have, and we realize we need to have a couple drop downs, and when we select from this one and select from that one, it's going to go get some stuff and display it, and we don't understand what it exactly is we're supposed to display, we need to go to somebody in our company who wrote that document or knows those requirements to ask them that question. So that if that expertise is missing from the team, that's kind of telling us that person really should be part of this team. If we have, if we're working on software where we can't gather the knowledge we need in just 5 or 6 people, then probably uh, we're trying to work on something that's too large, and we need to decouple parts of it and work on the parts that we have the expertise for. Again, that person that's missing often turns out to be the product owner if you're working in an agile environment or the business analyst. They're working on other stuff. They're not here with the team. Having that knowledge with the team, I think, is an important thing. I think we need to rethink how we consider the product owner. I think the product owner should be with the team almost all the time. And if not, let's figure that out for each team best we could do.
Mm.
Remember, when I used words like should, I'm not meaning to tell you what you should do. I'm just saying for me how I view it. I want to have a tester, a database expert. I want to have the product owner. I want to have the coders needed. Everybody there at the same time. We will flow through the work. It doesn't seem effective. Turns out it is effective.
That's true. So I have two more questions.
Excellent.
Um, should you mob program for full days, or is it better to do it for parts of the day? Because it seems like it would be exhausting to do this for 8 hours.
Ah, that's a very good question because we didn't find it exhausting to do it for 8 hours. And I'm working with teams right now who are working all day long this way. We just need to figure out why is it exhausting us and reflect on that daily and turn up the good on making it stress free. So if we notice something is exhausting us, let's examine why. If we find it to be exhausting, let's pace ourselves differently. But there's no reason you need to work this way all day. This isn't replacing solo work or teamwork or other meetings. This is just adding another dimension, another technique that's not really the right word, but another approach to our work. We can, I've watched teams work this way. They sit together as a team all day, but they have it set up where they can break into pairs or solo workers at any moment. So if we're looking at something on the screen, and there's some, let's say, a bunch of configuration to do on a tool, and right now we think that's going to be blocking us on our work, some individual will turn to their own workstation and they'll work on that configuration while we're working on something else. Then when they bring it back, we all get caught up and there we are. So you can break apart the mob into separate uh, individuals or smaller teams or pairs at any time. The team will find out what works best for them. The picture we're showing right now kind of could show potentially a team mob programming, and there's three children. They're looking kind of at a book on the one side, they're maybe reviewing some requirement that they need to better understand. That's maybe the product owner and a team lead. There's others there passing work around, and they're actually doing the building of the writing of the software right now. And there's somewhere in the back exploring some new idea that we think we might need tomorrow. But we're all in the same little area, so we can pay attention to each other and share ideas with each other. I think that picture is a nice kind of a way to think about this. I have another picture that shows all the kids in the picture are all sitting together playing at the same thing, so you can have both. You can be working individually or as a team at any moment, and you can dynamically switch as needed, but make it comfortable, make it easy, make it less stressful. Really pay attention to that.
Mm. Okay, last question. So the question is about when you're doing non-programming work in a mob remotely, for example, UX or design work. Um, do they have the same problems, and can you apply the same tips for them as you presented today?
My feeling is yes, because the design studio ideas and so on really are about collaboration. It's very rare. So let's say what the individual was doing was this actual drawing that we're looking at the screen right now. The initial sketches for that might be done very rapidly as a group, and then somebody would go work alone on generating the actual artifact. With UX, you're almost always working with somebody with UX, anyways, UX design. You're going to be interacting with users, you're going to be drawing prototypes, and so on. So we just have to ask ourselves, how do we turn up the good on the collaboration? Not everything we do will be done as a group, but it's rare that there's something that we're doing that can't be improved by collaboration. A lot of times right now, I'm sad to see this happening in our industry. We think that we need to design the entire user experience before we code the application, and that's something I think that's just reintroducing the waterfall. We now have phases. We're not working on the same thing at the same time. And I think as an industry, we need to learn how to do that much more iteratively. There is an example I showed in the earlier pictures. There was a team that we looked at SVT, and their UX designer works on the team. They're part of the team, and they spend most of their time with that team. So we just need to figure this out. There are things that we just do as individuals, like the example here of actually turning the artifact into a JPEG or whatever it's going to be shared on a site. Somebody's editing a photo, things like that. You might do that individually. There's no easy way to break that up into a team activity. But let's just accentuate and discover and accentuate any opportunity we have to work
Mm.
as collaborators. That's my viewpoint. I think
Mm.
we hamper ourselves when we believe that everything we do has to be solo, or that there are things that we consider only are good for solo work. Let's not. Let's see if we can find a way to collaborate on them. Let's turn up the good on collaboration.
Yes, that sounds like a plan.
Yeah, there we go.
Okay, so that was the last question for today. So I want to thank you all who have been watching today. It's great to see so many people who wanted to get to know this, and I will once again want to thank you, Woody, for doing this and for taking all the time to answer all these questions. It's really appreciated, I must say.
Well, it was certainly my honor and pleasure, and I really enjoyed this.
That's really great. We will be doing more live streams. Our next one is on Tuesday, 31st of March, which will be presented by Martin Mazur. He will give his talk called Please Don't Kill Me. and I promise you that you don't want to miss that. I would also like to mention that we will post a link to the WHO's donation page in the description of this stream. If you want to, you can go in there and donate to the research on how to fight this virus that we are fighting, if you can and if you feel that it's valuable. But until next time, stay safe and don't forget to wash your hands. Thank you. Bye-bye.